Ooh, child. As we get ourselves in motion, get ourselves ready. Put that up like this. All right, make sure everything's catching up. Cool. Welcome to another Friday night of lectures. Wait, someone just sent me some shit. Yes, I saw everybody waiting. I can see everybody that's waiting. Welcome, Titans. Welcome, Star Seeds, Shamanesses, all that good stuff. If you not listen to the God Hour podcast, and y'all know that's the lineup. Really understanding your hands in the dynamic of your life. The Piety Society, or the use of those scapegoats of the fundamental thought processes to make us have a safety net. A lot of times we build on this safety net process. We build on this, I'm going to use a safety net. I'm going to do the jump, but I'm not going to jump all the way. I need a reason, or I need an antagonist, the protagonist aspect. I need something to put me out there in that space. But then I always ask this question to myself. I started asking myself this question. I was like, then what? It's always been a then what to me. Once we find out a certain amount of information for ourselves, there's always going to be this then what? Okay, now what? What's the next? What was the original purpose for you going into certain spaces? And that's that we're breaking this piety complex, or being bound to always having a way to feed outside of ourselves without really learning how to feed ourselves. But we're getting into that. We're getting into this aspect. Understanding this is the key. Without the shadow work, understanding, getting into your shadow work, getting into yourself, coming into that healing space. Without the shadow work, none of this shit matters. Without you doing the internal healing, nothing that you're going to do matters. Without you, and this is like me being like, this was not the conversation I used to have with myself while we were waiting as it fills up. This was the conversation that I constantly started having with myself on a normal basis. I gave my higher self the assignment to give myself this same conversation every time that I was dishonoring myself or putting myself in a position where it was not the position that I needed to be in. I was always like, okay, now what? What does that mean? What is this going to be for? What does that mean? What is that going to lead to? What's next? And then I always found myself falling back. I was like, well, I was doing it because that's how a lot of us do a lot of our things in our life. A lot of times in our lives, we put ourselves in a position to where, without admitting to ourselves the real reason or coming into terms. Remember, Friday before last, we talked about the shame, the guilt complex, the insecurity complex, and a lot of these wounds. A lot of times, the real reason to why that was put into that position was not the thought that we gave to ourselves in the beginning. And I'm gonna start with a story. Crazy ass story. Download while I was on my walk. It was about me being a result of a twin flame relationship. Like me being a result of a twin flame relationship. My pops, I remember my pops always told me about this one nice shorty, this nice lady that he was that he talked to, and he always talked about her. He was like, yo, she was like, when it came to me expressing my business aspects and like we was on the same wave, she had all of her credentials. She had all of these things. She had built herself up to a certain point, but it was just something about her that that reflected that I couldn't get past. And then I was like, oh, I didn't understand what the fuck. This was like back in, I think I was like 16, 17 when that happened. And I never understood why he told me this conversation. And then I remember the story of my conception with my mom and my father, and the story that my aunt told me. It was similar. It was very much similar in the build of it to a twin flame relationship. And then going back further, looking at my mother's relationship with herself, my mother never met her father, and my pops never met his mother. My pops never met his mother, and my mom never met her father. The reason that I'm saying all of these things is because this is the dynamic of how you created your soul contract. Everything that you need to understand your soul contract, to understand your past life regressions, to understand every aspect of you is written in your current state of where you at right now. Exactly. Everything that has happened to you is happening for you. It's not happening to you. When you look at it from the emotional aspect, when you're looking at this shit from that emotional aspect, of course, this is where the filter of shame, the guilt, the insecurity, the doubt, and all that is an emotional, all that is the emotional trigger of the wound of the feeling that created that space. You're feeling everything that happened in that space. This is you becoming, this is the point where I'm talking about fundamental consciousness. Your consciousness is simply being aware. Consciousness is simply being aware. That's all consciousness is. You are being aware of your neuro linguistic programming, the programming and everything that came into your space. That's all that it simply is. The natural aspect for us from an ego perspective, your ego trying to protect you. The natural aspect of your ego trying to protect you is always going to try to externalize and compartmentalize to keep you within a rational feature, to keep you within this rational space, so you don't learn the lesson. Instead, you fundamentally compartmentalize everything, or you put everything into a certain space, and then the longer that you do it, the more things are created and replicated within that space. Everything that you've ever created. Everything that you created up until this point. Think about it like this. How many cycles have you been down here? If you don't know how many cycles, how many times have you been down here? How ancient are you? There's a reason that certain words and certain aspects pulled out, and you were like, ooh, yeah, that's me, or ooh, that's me, or ooh, that I like the way that sounds. There's a certain reason that came to you. But here comes the lesson. Here comes the aspects of the lesson. Why does that trigger you? Why does that give you a certain element of energy to yourself? Why does it make you feel a certain type of way? Why do you think a certain type of way when you think about that? Why? Then what? Now you're this, then what? Everything that you're trying to run away from now in this space of this, based on that fundamental thought, based on that pious thought, being stuck within the binding, trying to you're still compartmentalizing, you're still in this state of polarization or trying to compartmentalize things, the same things that you didn't understand over here that were in those compartments are the same things that are showing up over here in new compartments. They're not new, they're the same compartments. They're just now aspects of your shadow until you put light onto them things. But as long as you're sitting here going back and forth with yourself saying that, yo, they're doing this and they're a product of this, they're an aspect of you. Everything outside of you is going to be that aspect of you meant to serve you, meant to serve the old aspects of yourself. Everything that you created within your space lives to serve. Everything based in your human narrative, the humanity aspect, it lives to serve. Remember when Loki said that shit Remember when Loki said that shit? Humanity lives to serve. Humanity is a corporation. Your body is a tool. Here's the thing that fucks you up. Here's the thing that'll fuck us up. Until you take ownership of this body and you use it as a tool, and you're saying, yo, this is a tool. This is my corporation. I put my stamp on this body. Everything that this body has done, yes, I did. Until you take the ownership of these things, you can't take full control of your body. Because there's still always something that can be used against you. That's the things being used against you. Everything from what we don't get into tonight, you thinking about, oh my God, there's a secret shadow government. There's a secret societies and shadow governments and all of this shit. That's no more different. And I'm going to break it down tonight. That's no more different than the family secrets that are keeping your family together. Nothing different than the family secrets that are keeping your family together. Uncle Ricky, Uncle Bobby, all family members that have done things that y'all kept that secret to the grave. Ain't nothing different than the secret society. You're thinking about the aspects of the government. There's a shadow government. There's five families that run the world and the governments and all of this shit. You thinking all that, and we're going to break that down tonight, talking about the governments and shit. That's nothing more than your internal systems being in conflict. There's nothing more than your internal, the external manifestations of your internal conflicts in that collective grouping of consciousness, all in that effects. That's why when you start really doing your work, you start looking at those things and you're like, there's no point in me trying to fight this that exists for a reason. There's no reason for me to sit here now in myself to say, yo, I'm going to stand up. There's no reason I'm going to stand up against, there's no reason for me to sit here and say, yo, I'm going to fight and stand up against the government. There's no reason for me to say, there's no aptitude or reason in me saying that because because I've learned how to govern myself. I've learned how I operate. So since that I know how I operate, I don't need that system. I don't need that factor. I don't need that faculty of a system. I'm not looking at it as anything but a faculty of systems that are in place to keep something maintained, to keep something locked in. Once I learn the system and it is based on corporations. If you don't have ownership over yourself, then of course you're gonna need a governing factor while you're down here. The same way when you don't master your emotions. The same thought process when you don't run your emotions, you don't have master or under control of your emotions. You don't have understanding of your emotions. You haven't built in that aspect with your emotional aspects of yourself. That means you allow somebody else to make you mad. You allow somebody else to get you upset. You allow somebody else to make you sad. You allow somebody else to be the primary happiness or whatever the emotional catalyst is. They're your master. They govern your happiness. They govern your anger. They govern these aspects of yourself. Until you learn to balance your emotions, there'll always be a catalyst, whether it be a direct reflection of that karmic relationship of the debt that you have ensued. But you're stuck on debt. You want to go acquire more debt. Like everything becomes a synonymous to this algorithm of this thought process that once you master you you literally master everything. Once you remove all of these layers, there's nothing sinister there. We always think, oh, there's something sinister. There's something sinister about the government, and they're doing all of this secret shit. But meanwhile, there's shit that's happening in your own family accordance that you still haven't had a conversation about. The way that you built your entire life was based off of aspects that you're not talking about, those same wounds. You're still building within these aspects of these old wounds of yourself. The same exact way that you came into position. That's why I started with that story talking about the aspects of being a twin flame, result of a twin flame, is the same result that you came into this space of. I was an anchor through a twin flame of something that my mother tried to run away from. My mother was running away from her true self. My mother ran away from her true self for those 12, at 24, when I was born, when she was 24, when I was born, ever since that day, she has been running away from herself. Everything she's done as a result in her life was based on her running away from herself, running away from dealing with things she needed to deal with. So the entire spectrum of my childhood was based on this long ass wound of avoidance. My mom was avoiding herself. My mom never explored herself. My mom never learned herself in all of these aspects. So everything that she did, even up to this point, like my mother, if I was to ask, my mother doesn't know how to do certain, my mother doesn't know how to operate in certain functions. Now that she's in the space where she's at, that reality setting in, and she's like, I don't know what to do now, because she stayed within the old paradigm of programming. My pops, I told y'all last week, my pops been gone. My pop's came back to him. My pop's soul came back to him 3 years ago, and now it's about to leave out again. But like the entire dynamic of how my life was built was based on them running away from something. So everything that they did, everything that they said, and this is when we start listening to these certain undertones and these certain trigger words, you'd be like, wait, that's what it means by like, that's what it meant. My pops would like say, my pops would have such a hard aspect of things when he would say certain things to me. Like, he was so sure of things. He was trying to be so sure of it. Like everything that I did, he kept under a microscope. Because that's what he learned to. That's how he learned to create. That's how he learned to create things. Everything that you're doing, you're gonna create something out of it. But based on your emotional, the emotional catalyst is how you're going to create it. Your emotional bindings. My pops had emotional bindings. He was a disciplinary. My pops was a disciplinary. When it came to providing and the protecting aspect, it was through a disciplinary aspect. My pops, remember, my pops never met his mother. Ever. My pops never met his mother. He was raised by his grandmother, which was my grandfather's mother. And she was according to the stories in the channels, she was like the evil stepmother from the Cinderella story in that aspect to my father. So everything that my father saw in that's what he carried on forward. So his being a disciplinary or being in this aspect of having control or protecting himself, because all he was doing was protecting his inner child, still trying to protect his inner child from something in the current state, that vulnerability aspect, that's what he kept doing inside of this space. So whenever he saw me doing something, whenever he saw me saying something, doing something, acting a certain way, it was no more than him seeing his inner child. The things that he did not do or understand with his inner child, that's how he was raising. That was the trajectory of how he was raising me. The same thing with my mother. The same thing with my mother. The wounds of the inner child were the things that she projected onto me. So that became her aptitude of love, of her showing her love into that, giving that love into that space, that nurturing into that space. I damn near wasn't there. I only existed through their emotional wounds. Because now, as I look at myself now, where I'm at now, it's like when I go back into the memories and I really start looking at these things and aspects of as I heal myself and I go back and look, I really don't exist. I don't exist there. I never existed. The only thing that makes me exist in that space is the emotional memory, the emotional blockage or the emotional memory that has me in that space. If I go, like, for example, if I was to go to my mom's house next week looking like this, looking the way that I look, my mother cannot see me as this. The only way that my mother can see me is based on the 10-year-old me, the 12-year-old me. She's going to see me through a trajectory of hurt. This is an understanding point for a lot of us when we're going into our spaces. When you're in a certain space and you realize when you hear your parents say things like, they only see you, they still see you as the little child, they still see you as that little one, it's because they're only seeing you through that level of emotional light, the level of light that gave them into that space. It's not, that's as far as they can see you. Until you deal with your inner child, that's how you gonna see them. When you really start dealing with it, as you advance, as you grow, as you heal, as you advance, as you grow, your position changes. Your position is going to change. My position has changed. I'm no longer the little hellion running around burning shit and beating up and putting a hot ass patch on my brother's leg. I'm no longer him. I'm the father now. I'm the mother aspect now. That's my new position. So now when I go back to that space, that's how I'm going to act. That's the natural faction of how I'm going to act within that space. I can't avoid it. I even notice when I have conversations with my mother, it's more like it's like when I'm talking to my mother, the channel of her father comes through. No, I'm gonna tell the story. When I was little, I learned what hot and cold was my damn self. I learned what hot and cold was. My little brother was sitting beside me, and I was sitting there in the kitchen. I was like cooking. I was frying up an egg, and my little brothers kept getting on my nerves. I told you I did some hellacious shit when I was little. My brother is standing beside me, and he's getting on my nerves. So like I take the spatula, and like he tries to throw something at me, and he tries to run off. I was like, "Don't hit me." My exact words to my little brother were, "Don't hit me, because I'm gonna get your ass." I took the hot spatula, and like while he threw something, he threw water at me. He threw some water at me. I reached out with the spatula, and he was trying to run off. My brother was bow-legged. Hit him right there in the back of his leg. He got them 3 marks on the back of his leg right now. I told you I did some pretty messed up shit. I think he still got the burn mark on the back of my brother's leg. He still got the little 3 marks on the back of his leg. So like every time, now when I make the joke with him, every time the Jay-Z song come on, 3 slits in your eyebrow trying to wild out, I said, "Then you got 3 slits on the back of your leg trying to wild out because you was trying to wild out." I always make jokes with him with that. But let's get back to this space. As you are advancing yourself, as you are advancing, as you are growing, you are removing yourself from these bias points. It's not meant for you to sit there and become pious and go into the state of piety with your mindset of saying, I would never do that, because you've done it. Everything down here you've done, or you've done, or you've experienced, or you observed, or you're observing in that space. That's what it's down here for. It's not meant for you to sit there and say, I would never do that. I would never do that. I would never do that. Because I can guarantee you there is a version of you based on that thought of you saying that you didn't do it. There's a version of you that exists in that quantum aspect of yourself that's done it. That's why it shows up. But in this space, as you're advancing, you're going to notice these positions, and simply in you being in certain spaces, it was never the reason that it didn't exist. It was meant to teach you some shit or make you go through a space and go into a certain point, that correspondence. Until you understand that and you accept that, that's why they can. I had this thought when I was on my walk. I was like, yo, so if we created everything, we are the original, we are the creators. We created everything. We created everything. We created every aspect, everything in that space. And according to the shit that I've learned about the creation story and the spark, only the ones with the divine spark or with the soul or the enlightened soul can create. Everything else will everything else only can replicate from what it's seen or from its own experience. Okay. And then I took that thought into my mind. I was like, all right, cool. So everything else only can replicate based on from its experience. So then it made me really think about what I read about 2 years ago when I read that post. It was like, our parents are raising us for a world that does no longer exist. And then we just carry on. Then I thought about like, yo, we just carry on that same initial ideal. That's all we keep doing every single time. Our parents raised us for a world that doesn't exist. Then we raised that our great-great-grandparents raised our parents for a world that no longer exists. And then so on and so forth, and so on and so forth, all the way down the line. That's what this kept getting created until it came to you. Now you sit in your space. Now that you're aware of yourself, now it's time for you to look at how much of my world have I created with the dynamics of my world, the dynamics of my universe, the dynamics of where I flourish from. How much of it was created, and why did I create it? Why did I have what I've had? Why do I have what I have? Why did I create what I created inside of why did I create this? Why did I create such a dynamic? Let me take ownership over this. Why do I feel shame for this? Why do I feel shame for this every time I look at it? Even though it was one of the best times in my life, why do I feel shame now that I look back at it? Because the reason that I created it wasn't based on, it didn't, now that the purpose is no longer being served, I can see it for what it really is. That's one of the hardest aspects when it comes into your space, when you really start looking at your life and you start taking this tally of your life and you start looking at what things are and why you put them in your space, why it's there, why you created that anchoring point. Why do you still use that anchor point? Why do you still, what conversation? It all breaks down to a conversation that you've had with yourself. Everything that you're going to be doing is going to break down to that conversation that you've had with yourself. Today, I wrote out an entire script. I wrote out a script of previous conversations that I've had with in relationships in this case. I wrote out a script and I looked at my damn script and I was like, I've had this same conversation over 7 times, at least. I've been in 8. I've only had 8 relationships my entire career here on this space. I'm like, I've had this same conversation 8 different times at least. Same conversation. What's the difference between this conversation and all the other conversations? Where was I at? What was the initial conversation with myself first to where I had this conversation? And the conversation that I had with myself, the conversation that I recalled the day, and I wrote it out and I really looked at it. When I really looked at the conversation, I was like, nigga, this is a script based on one have a reaction and one have a response. There's been points in time where I was the her in this script. There was times and points when I was the her in that script. That means everything when I wrote this script and I looked at the her points, I just switched the her points to him points. And I said those same things as the her, as the chicks would say in the relationship. And there were points in time where I was in relationships where I was fully as the aspects of him, like going back and forth in these conversations. It all breaks down to a conversation that you keep having with yourself. How much of your conversation is truly based on confidence of yourself, and then how much of your conversation is based on you trying to convince yourself of something? You're trying to give yourself this narrative or this false sense of a narrative for your ass to actually say some shit or live a certain way. How much of your conversation is really you? How much of your conversation is avoidance? How much of your conversation is based upon rejection? How much of your conversation? These are the questions that you start asking yourself. These are the questions that when you're working with me, these are the questions that we're going to start building into. Because if you can't answer the then what to those questions, the why to these questions, you can't answer the then what and the why to these questions, then everything outside of you is not going to make sense. You're going to have a reason to look at everything outside of you, and you're going to be like, nah, but that right there and this right there, and that's an enemy, and they and them, and you're constantly going to be in that. You're constantly going to be in conflict. You're constantly going to be in conflict because you're constantly in competition. You still want to be seen as one aspect of yourself, but you've never been that aspect. I'm going to give you some trippy shit. They never lied to you. What if they never lied to you? What if they never lied to you? Let's think about that. What if they never lied to you? Remember, your ego is trying to protect you. Your ego is trying to protect you. So it will automatically augment everything that's coming to your information, comes into your stream. What if they never lied to you? The they that you want to, what if they never lied to you? What if you took the aspect of them saying you were 3/5 of a human? What if you took that and you really broke down that fraction and really looked at how you were 3/5 of a human based on identity, 3 parts of you, the intention was your identity, and then that 5th part of what you built around that? What if that was the what if that was the science? What if they've never lied to you? They gave you exactly what you needed to do what you needed to do. They gave you what you needed based on reaction. That's all they've ever been doing. That's been the entire ritual. Feed the source, feed the source, feed the source, give you the offering, and then you make it whatever the fuck you want to make it. What if that's been the entire point of what they've done? If you accepted that thought process into your mind and then you removed everything else, you made you extract all of the other layers of your thought process, that would change everything in your dynamic. That would change everything in the dynamic of how you move, how you walk, how you talk, how you act. You always want to go buck against some shit. But what if they never lied to you? They gave you exactly what you needed. What if the only reason that you couldn't agree with it was because of an internal factor and an internal conflict in yourself, i.e. mother issues, i.e. father issues, i.e. family member issues, family secrets and shit that you haven't dealt with in an emotional content forced you to react in the way that you reacted. What if that's because in reality, that's what, because in thought process, they're only reacting. They can't make a move until you make a move. That's the pacifiering process. You keep falling for the pacifiers. Most of your life, you running around here falling for the pacifier. They do something. That's like in your regular fucking life, in your regular life, in regular relationships, the same way that you got pacified from the same way that your father used to pacify your mama, or whatever your mom's boyfriend used to pacify her, is the same way you being pacified now. You're just carrying on the continuum. What if that was the whole feature? What if that's what you've been doing the entire time? What if you sitting there? What if right now you're doing nothing more than you're sitting in your living room. You've been sitting in the same space the entire time and you ain't made a move yet. You just been acting out shit. You've been allowing everything out. You've been allowing everything to just take its course. That's what it's like when you're not going to. This is what it's like when you're not taking accountability for yourself. When you take zero accountability, when you do not take responsibility, when you do not set your standard, when you're not coming into your healing process, that's basically all that you're doing. You're allowing something else to set the course or to set the momentum in which of the way that you're going to move. So you can say to yourself, yo, I'm doing this now, and I'm gonna be doing this next, and I'm gonna be doing this now, and I'm gonna be doing this. Okay. 4 years go by, you still ain't done shit. How much of your shit how much of your life have you been sitting there projecting half of the damn time? I know why a lot of the things that I've done and I've accepted my accountability is because most of the times when I was in these spaces, job, relationship, friendships, the reason that they did not flourish or they could not be nurtured is because I was feeding a projection. I spent more time in these spaces projecting or living out a projection than actually doing any real work. So my byproducts are the things that I had, and I noticed this with myself. I was like, damn, nigga, like, I look back at my life and I was like, I've spent a lot of money. Where the fuck did it come from and where the fuck did it go? This is when you start really looking back at your life. I was like, damn, I spent a lot of cash. I've done a lot of shit. Where the fuck did everything go? It only existed based on that emotional aspect. That's why when you go back and you remember it, you sitting there like, shit, is that? You sitting there like, fuck. You sitting there with yourself, and then now you sitting in that space of, now you feel bad, now you feel insecure, now you feel bad, you feel rejected, you feel disheartened, you feel this certain type of way. That's what your ego does. That's what your ego does. That's what your inner child does. When your inner child is undisciplined, that's what it does. You let it come out, it runs around, it does a bunch of shit with the little stuff that it had, and then now you sitting there having to clean that shit up. It's time to really look at how you built your life. Everything that you put into that perspective. There's nothing outside of you that did anything to you worse than you doing to yourself. There's nothing outside of you that's going to do anything worse or more than you do to yourself. Period. There's nothing. There's nothing outside of me that tells me, there's nothing outside of me that can make me feel any type of way about myself. Anything about what I say, what I do. And there was layers to that shit. Because before, when I used to say that shit, it was all under the guise of, I don't give a fuck. I don't care about shit. I don't give a fuck. I'm unapologetic. All I got to do is this. I wasn't experiencing my no self yet. I still had identity I was trying to maintain. Whenever you sit here, whenever you feel this need to yourself, and I learned this, and I love that I've learned it. Whenever you feel the need to express through a point of anger, or you're sad, or you're upset, when you're expressing through emotion, 9 times out of 10, if there's no emotion, or if there's no emotional catalyst to bring up that thought process, you won't say it. You won't say it. You won't complete the circuit. If there's no anger if there's no energy, if the energy that is defined through anger is not there, you won't say half of the things you're going to say. That's why when you approach certain situations from that calm, somebody got to be calm in that situation. When you approach certain situations and you say what you really need to say with no anger, and you say it with confidence, you say it with no anger, you say it with no sorrow, and you say it from the position of offense, 9 times out of 10, motherfuckers are naturally going to step back they're going to step back and be like, oh shit, I do not know why I even thought I could say that. When I started acting in this way, even in relationships, all of my relationships and friendships changed. Everything naturally changed. When I started speaking in this manner, from this space, no bias, asking questions, filling out that space, instead of me trying to be stuck in a constant reaction, the conversations changed. I stopped getting invited places. I stopped getting asked certain questions, all because of the position. I was in a different position. I didn't know how to take it. I was like, man, nah, though some of those old wounds were still present. That rejection wound, that acceptance wound. I was now acting and healing that wound. So it's going to sound like that in certain spaces when you say certain things, because you're learning yourself. You're learning how to discipline that inner child. Instead of you running out, jumping out and be like, yo, you got to. No, I'm no longer that person. I'm no longer in this status with myself. In a real question, I got a question to ask you. I'm about to ask the question. Where's my question? I wrote it down. Since you have awakened, since you've woken up, since you've come into yourself, when it comes to the term of loving yourself, when it comes to the love that you now give to yourself, you loving yourself, you accepting yourself, you apologizing yourself, you come into this healing space, how has that changed the way that you operate in certain spaces? When you start to love yourself, coming to this attitude of loving yourself and putting yourself as the primary, as an asset, it's naturally going to change how everything else moves around you. Half of the things that I used to sit there with myself and be like, oh my God, motherfuckers saying certain shit about me and I'm feeling some type of way or whatever it may be, I don't even look at it the same anymore. And that ripple effect has changed how I look at a lot of different things. I'm no longer looking at things trying to look for some shit. I'm not looking for anything. Like for example, I looked up, I don't know, like I was told to go look at it, so I looked at it. But it made me think I'm gonna build this story. I was sitting there in a space with myself and I was like, I forgot the black chick name that is real controversial. And she did an IG live and she was talking about the girl that tried to stab the other girl and got shot. And then the criminal got stabbed and some shit. And like what she said, as I'm listening to her, she had some valid key points. Valid key points. She had some valid key points. It was like, damn, she's kind of on the money with what she's saying. Like I can actually listen to what she's saying and be like, he kind of has a point of thought, of reference to think. And then it made me think about the Vote or Die campaign when Diddy was doing the Vote or Die campaign. And I was like, how much of the shit that you're doing is based on an identity? Motherfuckers rolled out and voted. I still didn't vote. Motherfuckers rolled out and voted simply because Barack Obama was black. So the identity of a black man in office, this dream or this thought process of a black man in office, oh my God, the image or the identity of a black man in office was going to be the greatest thing ever. But Bobby Hemmett broke down how you looked at that based on the physical in this space. Your ass gonna be disappointed. What that represented was something in a spiritual aspect or a spiritual aptitude. That spiritual aptitude. So now I'm looking at things. I was like, damn. Instead of me looking at this shit, yeah, I like that Vote or Die shit. That nigga jumping on 106 in Park. I was like, nigga, you look dumb. Okay, Vote or Die. I remember going to school the next day. Niggas had on Vote or Die t-shirts and shit. I'm like, nigga, I ain't putting that dumbass shirt on. And motherfuckers looked at me like, nigga, you ain't gonna go vote for our first black president? I was like, no. Why? Why? I'm not an emotional person. At this point in time, I was like, I'm in that space. Mm-hmm. You sitting out here in this space with yourself and you like, why? Oh, because that's a representation of, that's what most people use these things is. I broke that down last week when we talked about these protesters. Like you thinking about a protester and everybody going to that space. Everybody use that as a certain anchor. When you're going into your space, when you're building yourself, you're addressing all of these anchors that you used and why you came there, its position, and why you use this external anchor to define you. I'm no longer defined by external anchors. More and more is like I no longer am defined by external anchors. There's certain things like it doesn't work for me anymore. It doesn't work. Now that I've taken my energy and my power, my impulses away from this, and I'm building over here, it makes more sense. I'm no longer over here. I was walking on fucking eggshells trying to live. When you live in according to another routine, when you're allowing yourself to be governed by something externally, you're moving based on these your whole life is going to be a fucking carton of eggs that you walking around with in your entire life. Some motherfuckers need that. Some motherfuckers came down here. This is their cycle. That's what they need. They need to walk around on some eggshells because before they were walking around really, really reckless, and now they got to walk around in a new position. Everything is in position where it needs to be. You trying to fight against it. You trying to use emotional energy and pour all your energy into it. All it's doing is keeping that shit. You're just feeding yourself into that. The less and less that you feed yourself, do this real quick. Pop out chat. And restore chat. I'm gonna let the chat refill itself. But the longer that you're sitting in that position with yourself, the longer that you put in that position with yourself, the longer you're always going to need this external catalyst. Because you're naturally changing your definition. How you love yourself, how you define yourself, how you define yourself. You can't have love come to yourself until you learn how to define the love within inside of yourself. And you got to accept that motherfuckers are still going to be in a certain, they're going to be in a certain paradigm or position. They're only meant to show you like, yo, nigga, you on the right space. They're your tester. You moving in that certain position with yourself, like the way that you used to operate, the way that you used to move has to be challenged. The way that you used to move, the way that you used to think, the way that you used to eat, the way that you used to feel, the things, the reasons of why. Those are the things that got to be challenged in order for you to come into this new space and really build some shit with yourself. Most people get stuck in not really wanting to build things for themselves because you got used to it. You got used to an antagonistic type feeding. You got used to feeding a certain way. You got used to eating a certain way. You got used to existing a certain way. All of that shit's done with. The only thing that's left of the old paradigm, just like the creation story of white people, when they're, and I talked about that before, like in a lecture way back, when I talked about they are nothing more than the degenerative behavior. They are nothing more than the degenerative behavior complex. That's all that they are. All they are is the behavior. That's the same way as you start to change in your position. That's the same way everything else is. As you no longer put your energy into that space, all you're going to see is the rampant behavior. The behavior, the arrogance, the ego. All you're going to see is the examples or the expressions of the ego. There's nothing sinister happening. There's not an agenda that's going on unless you buy into there's an agenda happening. It's all based on the behavior. That's been the entire ritual the entire time, to get you to behave a certain way, to get you to connect your behavior to why you're not doing that is because you're conscious, because you're awake, because you're eating better, because you're doing better. Then what? If that's not there, then how do you know that you're doing better? If that's not there, how do you know that you're growing? Most motherfuckers got used to the catalyst with themselves of, this is why motherfuckers will get something brand new in the thought process because of that old emotional wound of you're trying to still prove to your mother that you can do some shit. You can do some new shit without it, or your father, these old complexes of yourself. Now you keep going back into that space. You're no longer, so you went in there on some big brother. I remember going into every space as the big brother. I'm no longer the big brother. I'm the father of that shit now. I'm a father now. I'm a father in that aspect. It's because I've mastered the lessons that the son would have to learn. I've mastered these lessons that the son would have to learn. I've mastered the lessons of providing and these true aptitudes of myself. I've taken ownership of these things. As the ownership, that's the father aspect. So you had the missing father aspect, that's going to be your learning process. So I go all the way back to the point of my mother never met her father. My pops never met his mother. So the things that created that space, my contract, my soul contract, and me learning these things, without that being there, I had to insert myself into that position. That's what you're doing. You put yourself into that position emotionally. That's why for most people, when you're stuck in that emotional channel, from the hurt that happened when you was 12, 11, 13, 12, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, whatever age you were, and you get stuck in that emotional channel, that adolescent channel of trying to create an identity, you can get stuck in trying to create an identity in that space to fit that paradigm, that old aspect of self. There's nothing of my old self that exists, minus the energy. The energy is all that exists after it's done. Once I've destroyed that aspect of myself, all that's left is the energy. That energy is fully defined, concentrated to me now. It's not based on the only way I can use this energy is if I'm going through anger, I'm upset. The only way I'm gonna shift is if I'm upset, I'm angry, I don't have to use that anymore. It's not a part of me anymore. So now as a healer, as a shaman, as a healer, when I do things, it's not based on me being this, me being that. I got to go through this point because it's naturally going to go through those points anyway. It's naturally your energy, after you define your aspects of yourself, it's naturally going to do exactly what it's supposed to do. And you are going to show up to that space as you need to show up. There is no trying anymore. Your magic, your energy, your essence, everything that you're doing, you ain't got to worry about, well, I got to go over here. I got to put this on. When I go over here, I got to go do this. Do what you're supposed to do. That's your confidence. That's you being in confidence of yourself. As long as you remain in a bias or a cognitive dissonance of trying to be accepted in a certain space, then yeah, you're going to go into that space and be like, exactly, flow. You in that? Nah, nigga, I can't go over there no more. I can't. There's just certain things for myself that I know I'm not going to do anymore. It's even more stronger now for me now that this Taurus energy is present. And it's like, I'm just moving forward, moving ahead. I'm no longer in the position of, nigga, I got to make this explanation or I got to say, I ain't got to do that no more. If it's time for me to step away, I naturally shall step away. The way that I came into that position, the conversation that I initialized into that space is no longer going to be based on me trying to find my way in. That's your confidence level where you're in your life now. For some of you, because I felt it a little bit this week, I was like, you know what? One thing that I used to do a lot of is I used to I was depending on the beginner level. I was very dependent upon the beginner level. I was very dependent upon motherfuckers because I really had to understand this flow of aspect of the reason that the information is coming to me the way that it comes to me is because I'm at a different point. Until I accepted that when I was like calling down for a lot of information to come to me, since I didn't understand the aspects of honoring my thought, I didn't understand the aspects of invoking. I didn't really understand these aspects. I simply read a book created an anchor and then tried to use it that way, a lot of the things that I gained in my beginning aspects, even in becoming conscious or aware of myself, that shit fell away because I didn't know how to maintain it. Because I didn't know how to maintain that shit. As opposed to now that I'm in the flow, one second. Now that I'm in the flow with myself, now that I'm in the flow, now my mindset is different in how I present it in that space. Now the way that I'm in my space, now that how I am now, the way that I'm presented, the way that I show myself, the way that I move is now different. It's not from a space of trying to fit in that compartment that I used to try to fit in. A lot of the things that I do now, they're no longer based on a compartmentalization process. When you're removing these layers, you're removing the old compartments. These are the layers of this work. These are the layers of that work. You're removing the compartmentalization process, and you're learning how your boundaries are naturally set themselves. You're removing the aptitudes of reaction, and you're now learning how to respond. You're removing the aspect of bonding based upon trauma and bonding based upon the basics on trauma, or premature bonding based on vibes that you created based upon the traumatic experiences of wounds, and now you're learning how to come into connection. All of this shit has to be, everything got to be relearned, and you got to go through your process. There's no skipping the steps to your process. There is no rushing. Your inner child, of course, is naturally going to want to rush because you're learning how to discipline your inner child now. You're learning how to work on yourself. You're learning how to sit in the aptitudes of the space that you're in and understand your dynamic. Don't allow things to rush you. Whenever you feel rushed, you know you're outside of your dynamic. This is one of the key aspects of understanding when you are outside of your space, or a space no longer serves you, you will feel rushed. You will feel like you're trying to catch up. You will feel like you're trying to maintain a routine. You will feel that you're trying to maintain an identity. These are the things that naturally come up, but they come through that space of that wound of insecurity, doubt, worry. They're going to act on these old wounds because that's what your ego needs to do. Your ego wants you to stay comfortable. So, of course, it's going to bring up things in the human narrative to you that are going to make you naturally feel uncomfortable about yourself, uncomfortable about you being who the fuck you are, as you are learning who the fuck you are, as you are coming into the space of who the fuck you are. There's damn near nothing that can trigger me now. I laugh at now the things that used to trigger me, I laugh at now. And that just feeds my original narrative of myself of I was already the type of person that when things were said or the things that I already had a dark sense of humor. Anyway, I'm ancient as fuck. I already had a dark, my natural soul had a dark sense of humor. All of my lives, I had a dark sense of humor. So now that I've embraced my dark sense of humor, it helps me look at things differently. That's the language of my soul. If I laugh at it, it's like, oh, that's something that's an interesting observation. To other people outside of that haven't came to that space, they gonna look at me like, nigga, you are an asshole, you are cold, you are this, you are that, and they're gonna give me their whole perception of me. You should be more this, and you should be more that. No, I shouldn't. I'm exactly where I need to be. I know I'm exactly where I need to be because it's naturally a natural state of, It's a natural state of, it's a natural space for me to sit there and look and be like, oh, I can observe from this point. You cannot observe from comfort. One thing that I learned is that you cannot observe from comfort. What observe? I'm gonna give you the trajectory point of your comfort, the scale of comfort. You're like, nigga, you was sick. Like, oh my God, like, nigga, I can't believe you said that. I can't believe you, like, I laughed at it. Now what? I can't believe you would laugh at somebody. Now what? Like, okay, you should know I shouldn't. If I was supposed to feel that way, then I would feel that way. But I don't. But you go into this aspect, this is what it's like every time you're inside of a space based on you learning your healing process. Or you're trying to hide or you're trying to avoid from something. Your secret, your shadow, the repressed emotion, the repressed aspect, the repressed memory, the shadow, the aspect of yourself you don't want to deal with, it's down here in a box. It's down here in this little, it's down here in the kill zone. Your ego is up top, looking like a sniper, ready to hit anything that comes to that point, observing everything for you. You standing down there and you're like, yeah, you're standing down there using the energy from this space of yourself down here, using this as your point for people to come in so you can just keep knocking people's heads off. Your ego is protecting you from a vantage point. It's time to put the name of your game is, as you're healing yourself, your ego goes into the kill zone. Your ego goes into the kill zone. You're at the vantage point. You're in your higher self. You're now observing. You're now the observer. Your ego now plays the role as the tool being used down here, doing whatever you need it to do. That's your light body. That's when I talk about killing your, I remember early on when I talked about killing your ego, you're killing your ego because we understand death is life and life is death. We understood that aptitude. So now your ego now works for you, but you got to kill it first. You must put your ego into submission. So now your ego's down in the kill zone. You're a light body. While you're down here, your ego is your greatest tool while you're down here. Because it can absorb everything. It can't be destroyed. It can't be destroyed. That's the base level of your etheric body anyway. Your ego is the base level. Your ego is the base level of your etheric body, your light body. That's what you get to program. But you got to go through the healing process to be able to program your ego. For most of us, when you come into your awareness, that fundamental consciousness, your ego's still doing the programming. Your ego's still doing the programming. Your subconscious sits in that damn box. You ain't went inside of it. You ain't dealt with it. It's sinister. Your ego, your subconscious is sinister. It's full of everything that you haven't dealt with yet. That's what's in there. That time your mom looked at you, that time your mom said some shit to you and you didn't agree with it. Every time that you didn't agree with it, it just kept growing. You didn't deal with it. You didn't know how to deal with it then. You know how to deal with it now. That time your pop said something to you, or your father said something to you, or your uncle said something to you, or your uncle did something to you. All of these events are just replicated. And it becomes something else in your life. So that relationship that you had with your uncle, and your uncle was too close to you, now you're constantly trying to fix and trying to recreate this relationship without the shame, without the guilt, without the doubt, without the wound. So now that's when you become over loving, or your discipline of how you love yourself, or the way that you administer your love is based to a perverse point. Because you still living out that same angle. You still stuck within that angle. The way that your mother did not show you love is how you learned how to manipulate your space. The way that your father wasn't there, or the way that your father was a disciplinary, now you in every relationship that you get into, whether you in the friendship, whether you in the relationship. That's why most niggas out here, nigga, I'm in the street. Nigga, I'm in the street with it. Nigga, I got my whole team around me. Nigga, I run this shit like I'm the general. You acting out the shit that your father did, or the things that you're either acting out what your father did, or the thing that you wish that your father was there to do. That's all you're doing. That's why you want to be the big gent. That's why you want to go stand out there on that block and go stand on that fucking corner. Because now you're stuck in that position. And then you living by these quotes of rappers and shit. And they're like, yo, I stood on the corner and this was my life. And I was just trying to protect and provide. They all give you the same exact fucking story. I came from a single parent household, and I was trying to protect and provide for my mother. I had to jump off the porch early to be my mother's husband, basically. I jumped off the porch and I accepted the Oedipus complex. Most motherfuckers are living through the Oedipus complex. The Oedipus complex, the Napoleon complex, all of these complexes are the same. They're the same fucking creation. The same fucking neutral point. The same fucking axioms created that point. That same point grew into what you see outside of yourself, of the external aspect of when we were little, I was taught, and then you carried on this thought process. You got it from somewhere inside of your environment. The society is your environment. You got it from your environment anyway. At some point in time, the fundamental awareness to not show your emotions, you just look for another reason not to show your emotions. How long are you going to, and this further goes back to the proving point of 90% of motherfuckers in their life in an unhealed sense that have not done their shadow work are only acting out from the days of when they came through their traumatic event. There's niggas out here right now that have been doing their thing for 67, like for years. The event that happened to them was 12. You bring that up to them, I can guarantee you they're going to say something about the white man in place of that. They're going to blame the white man on the reason that their dad held up the bank or sold dope. They're going to blame the white man for it because it's a nice piece. It's a nice implant it's a nice part that they can put in there so they can stop so they don't have to program that space. They can put the behaviors, because all the white man is a behavioral aspect. That's all it is. It's a behavioral aspect. Everything outside of you that you're trying to project on, the reason that it takes into the program is because it's a behavioral aspect. It's a behavioral conduit. That's why it can take on that role, that whatever role that you want to give it. But that only works for motherfuckers that don't have souls. If you ever noticed that and really thought about it, that only works for motherfuckers that don't have souls. The easiest motherfuckers control, they don't have a soul. They're not really there. That's why everybody that I used to know now, and I really thought about, was like, nigga, these motherfuckers don't even exist in my life anymore. There's not even an inkling of me sitting there trying to understand them or talk to them or have conversations with them, because they don't even exist. They don't exist they do not exist beyond the behaviors. The next time that you sit into your space and you really start taking ownership of yourself and you're working on yourself, really start looking at everybody that's around you. They don't exist outside of the behavior. They do not exist outside of the realm of what you're able to project. Everything that's meant for you, that's tied to your awakened aspect, your enlightened aspect, is naturally going to fall into position to what you already are, what you are to become, your purpose. I'm a healer. So 90% of the people around me, they're healers. Nigga, I make music for my podcast. I'm a content creator. So everybody around me, 9 times out of 10, they're creating some form of content. My society is content. They create content. I bet you did that shit unconsciously the entire time. Now that you coming into your consciousness, now that you're coming into your enlightenment, now you notice that your space changes. Having to think that I don't know outside of what I've seen on TV, honestly, I've never experienced, I remember when Lil Wayne said that shit, I've never experienced racism, ever. Most of the time, when I'm in a certain space, when white people are around me, they're very, very nice to me. Whether it's consciously or unconsciously, they're very, very nice to me. They don't say shit to me. They say, hey, how you doing? Some of the times, most of the times, I'm offset by them saying something to me. I'm like, nigga, you can see me? But other than that, it's like, it doesn't happen. It don't happen up here. I don't have a bias up here. They can't, that level of behavior doesn't exist up here for me. There's nothing for me to hide from up here. It only comes up here when you bring that shit up here. You still thinking that okay, cool. You down there, you in a certain position. Because I don't see that shit. I don't get that shit. That shit don't hit me up here. That shit don't phase me up here. Every time I see it, everything, when I'm looking at the shit, shit look more staged than anything. I'm like, nigga, that shit look really, really staged. That shit look really, really weird how that happened and they put it on TV. Wait. I remember when Bobby Hemmett said that once it's on TV, that shit's automatically government or a part of a ritual to keep your ass locked in anyway. So if it hit my timeline or if it hit the screen, then it really, really, is it really, really real? Is it really something I need to be putting myself behind? Who are these masses being knocked off? It made me really start thinking about a lot of shit in my life. So as I started thinking about those aspects in my life, by natural succession, thinking about that aspect in my life, it really gave me the time to reflect about the things in my truths, in myself, in my immediate society, my immediate environment. How many people in my life are talking about these types of things? And why do they always seem to bring that up? What's their purpose? If I'm not giving them a behavior to react to, they got to go look for a behavior to react to. Some of the times in your life, you haven't realized that the only reason that people are around you is based on a behavior. Once you start behaving that way, they go somewhere else to go find that energy somewhere. It's only when you start feeling a certain type of way, they're acting out based on the correspondence to shame or doubt or insecurity or whatever it may be, jealousy. And the only time that they seem to come around is, i.e., when you're feeling insecure, when you're feeling jealousy, when you're feeling type of doubt. That's when they seem to come around. That's your agent. That's what they've always been an agent of. That's what they were always a conduit of. so you can keep doing the same shit that you've been doing. Everything that comes into your space is based on a certain frequency anyway. So if you whatever you created in doubt, whatever you created in doubt exists only when you are in doubt. Whatever you created when you are angry only exists when you are in anger. Whatever you create when you were in grief only exists when you are within grief. So however you connect to something, if you connected to something based on grief or insecurity or on doubt, the only way that you can remain connected to it is if it remains in a state of doubt or insecurity. This is why I've said that before. Like when you start a relation, when you're in a relationship with friend, family, or whatever, how did you start that? How did you come into that relationship? Fuck how they came into it. How did you come into it? What was your mindset? Where was your mind at? Where were your thought? What was your thought process? What was your mindset? Where were you at in your mind, in yourself, when you came into that space? What were you when you came into that space? What were you? Were you happy? Were you sad? Were you content? What were you? Were you in search for something? Were you searching for some shit? Were you not searching for some shit? Why did you come into that? How did you come into that space? What was your mindset when you came into that space? Because that initial thought is the reason that they're in that space with you. They're here to give you that aspect of that reflection to that point. Now, if you came in, then this is the key point. If you came into that space based on avoiding something, avoiding the doubt, this is the honoring of the thought. So if I come into a space and it's based on avoiding my wounds or avoiding dealing with some shit or avoiding with some shit, the way that space is going to flourish, the way that everything's going to flourish inside of that space is going to be based upon that. The moment that I now challenge and actually start dealing with myself, that space is going to change its frequency. The frequency is going to be augmented. Now I'm going to start seeing it like, damn, I'm going to start seeing it for what it really is. There's nothing bad or good about it. There's nothing good. It's not bad or good. It's based on, am I still inside of this space? Am I still going to be learning something from this space? Is the aptitude of this space the way that I entered this space, am I willing to am I in a position to nurture inside of this space? Is this space really meant for me, or was it only meant for me to learn something? Ultimately, it's for you to learn some shit. If you are not unified with yourself, every space that you go into is basically for you to learn something of yourself. Until you become in full aptitude of balance with yourself, masculine and feminine aspects, integrated with your shadow, done all of the aspects of the work, I guarantee you that everything that you go into is going to be a great process of learning. It's going to be a great time for learning and experience. Don't try to look at it as anything else. Be truthful with yourself. Nigga, do I still need some healing? Yes, I still need some healing. Do I still need some work? Yes, I still need some work. All right, cool. That means everything that I'm going into is going to be to the aptitude of learning. I'm not shutting myself down or becoming pious or saying, nigga, I ain't going to be doing this. Nigga, I'm going to go into these experiences and I'm going to orchestrate based on the lesson that I need to learn. It's all working for me. Everything works for me. That's the way you got to look at this shit. You love yourself. You're healing yourself. You're agreeing in the balance with yourself. Everything works for me in that aptitude. Because if I go into a space saying everything works for me, if someone else comes into that space saying everything works for me, and we're not coming at it based on ego, we naturally now formulate based in that space. It's only when you go into a space based on a dependency. That means you're ready to serve some shit. Because either you're going into a space to serve or become. That's the worker aspect. Either you going into a space to serve or become. When you stuck in that lower aspect, lower vibrational shit with yourself, 9 times out of 10, yeah. When you working into a space based from a servitude, that means you're serving your, because when you're in the lower frequencies, you're in servitude. When you're in the lower frequencies, you're in servitude. Grief, trauma, doubt, all of that shit, you're in servitude. You're always going to be in servitude. That's why you don't take accountability and responsibility. The server don't take accountability and responsibility. Think about a server being at a restaurant. I remember every server at every restaurant that I ever worked at, they never took any accountability for any of the shit that they did. And I used to be like, why the fuck servers don't take accountability for the shit that they did? They would blame it on the cooks. They would blame it on the manager. They would blame it on everybody else but themselves. They know they didn't come pick up that order on time. They know they didn't come pick up that order when they were supposed to pick it up. But that was a learning experience for me. That's why I was in that space. I was learning what it looks like to be a server, to serve. I was learning what it looked like. I was learning what it is to the attitude of serving based on an emotional aspect. When you're serving your emotions. When you're in a when you're in the servitude position, you are being mastered. You are whoever controls your emotions is your master. Whoever controls your emotional currency is your master. That's what you came down here to learn. The emotional aptitudes. How to learn how to serve and benefit from your emotions. That's why the trauma happened. So you can learn the emotions that are attached to it. Everything down here to give you a purpose. Once you are aware of that, now you can start mastering. That's why when you become conscious, you are aware that, nigga, I was serving my emotions. Everything that I did served my emotions, my urges. The mastery part is facing those urges, not sitting there saying like, man, no. Being able to sit in a position because it's easy to avoid. It's easy to still use those wounds. The wounds still need to be addressed. Your ego now, because this is the aspect. When you're unconscious, your ego serves as the protector or it serves as the wounds. Your ego serves as the wounds. That means whatever traumatic event that you went through, your ego is now the mirror of your wounds. That's what your ego is. It's the mirror of your wounds. You are the shadow or in the dark place of yourself. It was a dark time in my life. It was a cold time in my life. You, in the darkness of your wounds, now are the shadow or the body or the inner child. That's you. When you become consciously aware, now you are directly becoming your ego. When you become conscious, you become your ego. Everything's about becoming or serving. You become your ego. That's why you got niggas out here talking about they're woke and they super bitches and chicks. Everybody here talking about they super woke. Nigga, they have become their ego. They have become the identity of their wounds. They have become the identity, and now they are serving their wounds. That's why niggas every fucking year will say 1619 was the beginning, this now is the end, but they never say anything behind it. This is why you will sit here and stay behind the identity of being black the entire fucking time. Nigga, that ain't serving no fucking purpose. The identity my old identity serves no purpose. If I don't take full ownership of it, what purpose does it serve? You become your ego. Now you have to master in killing. That's why the ego death becomes so prevalent. Because now you got to kill yourself. But you got to become your ego first. You got to stop being indirect and become direct. This is why when you come into this space with yourself and now you feel this aptitude of power and this energy and you're reading all the information and you're taking all the shit in, you're like, nigga, yeah, I feel stronger. I feel, yeah. But there's still shit that the reason that you came to this space is to deal with the shit in that space. The shit that gave you your identity. Most motherfuckers don't want to deal with that part. You can get scared, like, nigga, I don't want to deal with that part because that part is the part I don't want to deal with, because if I deal with that, then what am I? Then what? That's the then what's. That's the whys and the then what's. You don't want to deal with the then what parts? Cool, don't deal with them. But they're always going to keep coming up. They're going to keep coming up in your space. Always. They gonna come to you exactly as they need to come to you. So if you getting stuck on the grand scale of things and you stuck on, oh my God, it's the shadow government and the 5 families. The 5 families ain't nothing but the 5 fucking senses. The 5 families that run the world are simply the 5 senses. Look at the companies that they own. One company owns food, that's taste. One company owns the shit that smells good, that's smell. One company owns the shit that makes you feel some type of way. One owns optics of the things that you see, and one owns things that you hear. It's the senses. That's all they represent, is the senses. You thinking that they're so sinister? No, they only represent your senses. The 5 families represent your senses. That's why they're banks or emotional conduits. You still looking as a liability. As an asset, when you become that asset, you start looking like, oh shit, it makes sense now. They buy shit, they do everything based on emotional down. Everything down here based on emotion. I just looked at a video and I was, nigga, it made sense to me because when it came through, I was already in that space. I was like, I don't buy stocks, I don't buy crypto, I don't do any investing until there's a huge fear spike. If you look on CNN, I ain't looked on CNN in a minute, but if you look on the TV on CNN especially, they got this little thing in the side where it has like the fear meter. Whenever it's in the red, that's when everything's dropping, stocks and energy crisis. And whenever there's a crisis, everything dips, everything drops. Buy everything. Put a put on that shit because you're going to call that it's dropping. It's all going to drop. Whenever the ritual is over, whenever they pacify your ass, that's when everything goes back up. While you down here, you might as well, while you down here, learn this fucking game. Stop trying to buck against I'm going to go against the system because my people, they made a choice, nigga. At the end of the day, they made a choice based on an emotional wound. They made a choice. The reason that you ain't there is because you didn't make the same fucking choice. How many times did you tell that motherfucker not to go do that shit and they didn't listen? And now you want to go say free Pookie and free John, free Lisa, free them. Nigga, they made a choice. Ultimately, they made a fucking choice. Their choice gave them their choice brought them into their circumstances. With the information that you have, you didn't make that same fucking choice. The idea that you had, you didn't make that same fucking choice. Stop trying to connect emotionally to them. Well, yeah, man. Because 9 times out of 10, you always going to say the same shit. It's always the same script. You like to live based on the same fucking script. You always want to live on the same fucking script. Man, because they dad left them when they were 6, and their dad wasn't there in the house, and their mother was a single mother, and it's always the same narrative. They always use the same exact narratives. And if you have not dealt with your internal aspects, that's how you connect to that narrative. That's how you buy into that script. The same way when you looking at TV and you watching a TV show, there's 9 times out of 10 you try to become one of the characters in the TV show. There's somebody you don't like in the show. There's a feminine character in the show you never like. That motherfucker is your fucking mother. There's a nigga in that show you don't like. That's the idea that you put in your head about your father. Get Rich or Die. Remember in 50 Cent and Get Rich or Die Trying? That nigga made his father look like Rick James because he never met his father. And he said his father was Rick James. That's the same thing that your ass does. You implant yourself into these these aspects or these scripts based on your traumatic experience. That's why you connect to these fun motherfuckers. Motherfuckers sitting here watch Love and Hip Hop all fucking day. Mob Wives and Basketball Wives and Black Ink Crew. I remember watching Black Ink Crew and I was like, nigga, I got some Caesar aspects within me, nigga. I'm a little bit like Caesar. Not all the way to a certain level, but to an extent, nigga, I can understand the narrative of Caesar because nigga, I got that Caesar complex. That's why I looked at the damn show. Once I got rid of shame and insecurities and jealousy, when I looked at it, I was like, oh shit, nigga. That's why I looked at the damn show. Once I dealt with those aspects, there was no need for me to look at the show. Oh my God. 1 second. Once you understand everything is working for you, it changes your perspective on how you work with it. Everything that you have outside of you is doing things for you as you needed to do. It's living out its program. You are the framework to the program. When you step out of when you get into that point of no self, and then you start rebuilding the catalyst of yourself and creating the new image, you engraving your new image in that space. The key is to remove, as you're creating these images of yourself, what you did unconsciously, now you're doing it consciously. Now you're aware of what you're presenting yourself as. Use that example for me. It's like, now that I present myself as a certain way, now the aptitudes of the things now that I'm learning how to create my body of light. This is my body of light. Now that I know how to create this body, and I know how to create it, I know the specifications of this body, what keeps this body moving, what keeps it acting the way it needs to do. Now that I know these aspects, now the next point is naturally the parameters. What used to be blockages and compartmentalization and emotional aspects and all of these, the emotional aspects and the things that would give this body life or anchors that keep me anchored to this space. Now my body is different. The way that it operates is different. The operating system is maximized. So now it's not going to be, the way that I function, it's a powerhouse. This is when you start understanding these emotional catalysts that you get stuck in. Once you understand that everything in your body starts as a thought, and your breath and the emotions create these blockages in your body, chakra system, all of these aspects, and you learn how to govern yourself, your body's naturally going to fall into place. Your body's naturally going to fall into the place, into the position it needs to fall into. When the times where I was like over 200 pounds, I'm like 189 now. 180. I'm 187 now. I'm homicide weight. That's interesting. I'm homicide weight. I'm 187 now. I'm homicide weight. That means I'm very deadly. Now that I'm in this space right now and maintaining this, nigga, there's no thought to me maintaining my body. There's no thought to me maintaining my energy. It naturally happens. And whatever has to be the program that I have to, the program or the thought that I speak based on that now sets the tone for how I keep my body in this position. There is like everything has a purpose in your life. You got to define everything having the purpose in your life. The things that don't have a purpose in your life, or you have not defined that purpose in yourself, the thing that you have not defined inside of yourself based on your purpose of you is a distraction. You don't know what a distraction is until after it's done distracting your ass. Truest post I've ever seen this week. You don't know what a distraction is until after it's done distracting you. You don't know you're under some type of control until the control has already been done. One second. Get these 3 books real quick. These 3 books. Mind Control 101, Persuasion or Dark Psychology, and Manipulation Psychology. All 3 of these books all have the same catalyst talking about your emotions. If you can control their emotions, you can manipulate them. If you can control their emotions, you can persuade them. If you can control their emotions, you can keep them under mind control. So the catalyst that's already present. The catalyst is already present. They ain't got to put shit up there. The catalyst is already present. It's your emotional baggage. It's your not understanding your emotions. It's your traumas. It's the events that you came in through this cycle with. That's the baseline. They ain't got to do shit else. All they got to do is keep stroking that shit, and they keep your ass locked into this shit. But as you start to shift yourself out of the space that you used to be in, and you start taking ownership, the more ownership that you take, the less that they have control over. I can break it down when you're talking about shares, the shares in your company. If you start an LLC, if you haven't started one and you start an LLC, every time you apply for something, whether it's your business bank account or loans or getting credit or establishing anything, they ask you the same exact questions. One of the main questions is, how much of your company do you own? And everything that I do with niggas, $100. That's $100. That's 100%. I own 100% of my company. I own 100% of my company every single time. It's always the question like, I own 50% or more. It never says straight 100. But it's like, I own 50% or more of my company. In reflection of my life, when it comes to me, how much of me do I own? I own 100% of the dynamic of my creation, of everything that's created through my space. Whether directly or indirectly, I own 100% I take 100% accountability for what I did to create within that space. Once you own that and you say that, it changes everything. Because once you sit here and say you own 100% of everything that you put into a space, and I broke down this number to 70, 30% that shit came in. I was like, nigga, that makes so much sense. Every time you go into a space, guarantee you're only going to put in 30%. You're only going to put in 30% of your energy. Anything over 30%, you're overdoing it. You're putting in 30% of your energy into every space that you go into. Whether it's 10% of your true energy and 30%, whether it's 10% of your true self, depending on where you at in your healing, it can be 10% of your true self and 40% of projection from an unhealed standpoint. So if you go into a space and somebody brings 30% in, depending on their percentage, both of y'all have 10% of your true self in there, and the other 20% you put in there is a projection. Then the 40% that's created in that space, that's the lessons. But if all that's it's a projection, so 40% of your life of when you went into a relationship, everything you created was trips and relationship goals and all this other shit, Facebook posts, Instagram posts, all these fucking posts, all these trips you took, 40% of your shit was based on projection. That's why when you leave out the relationship, there's really nothing there at the end of the day. But if I go into a space and I'm 30% strong of my true self, there's no projection, there's no avoidance, I'm open, I'm honest. That means 10% of me is trust, 10% of me is vulnerability, 10% of me is openness. That's the 30% that I brought into that space, because that's all you really need to be, yourself, who you are, and your truth. That's what you bring into a space. That's 10%, 10%, 10%. That's 30%. The other individual that comes into that space, they're going to bring in their functionality, and then based on whether it's a karmic relationship, all of this shit break down into fucking numbers. The numbers is all numbers. That 10% of what, that 10%, that 10% of this, that 10% of that. If they have not maximized it, if they have not learned how to trust themselves, then it's going to be 5% of their trust is going to be 5% based on a projection of a wound. Because that's how that space functions. Remember, everything is going to find balance, chaos within the order. Everything, every time you go into a space, is naturally going to try to find balance. That's why when you go into certain spaces, when you're doing your work and you go into a space and you feel drained, that means you are feeding a projection. Never thought about it that way until I was like, wow, wait. When I'm going into a space and I'm trying to win an argument, I'm feeding a projection, because I shouldn't be going into the space to win anything anyway. If I'm going into a space based in a competition type sense, they're trying to compete with me, I'm feeding a projection. That's why I'm drained. Because if I'm in a space based on balance, that means the reciprocation is naturally there. That means I'm naturally going to be recharged when I leave out the space. I love having conversations when I'm charged at the end of the conversation. When you start you're like, nigga, that's why you're feeding a projection. When you leave out of a situation and you feel drained, or you feel some aptitude of your emotion, you feel a certain type of emotion that came to the surface, and you feel drained in that situation, you're off of your square, it's because you were feeding a projection. That's all you were feeding. You literally fed a projection. I had a homeboy that literally, after I went back and recalled all of our conversations, I didn't understand why every time I had a conversation with this dude, I always felt these remnants of shame and doubt and insecurity. And I was like, why the fuck am I feeling this shit? I know it ain't for me. And then I went back and looked at the conversations, and I was like, everything this nigga said sounded like a kid or a servant or a slave to their emotions. This nigga, he always sounded slavish when he talked to me. It wasn't to the aptitude of like, yes, sir, boss. It was like he sounded real, even though he spoke from a certain level of strength, I can tell that his conversation with me was still hiding something. It was from a projective point. So when he projected from a certain point, I noticed this conversation had a lot of anchors in it. He couldn't simplify things past a certain point. So when he was having a conversation with me, I'm simplifying everything to that point. I'm simplifying everything. And the only thing that he could say, because he could not explain what I was doing, is like, yo, your man's is on some shit. The way your man's mind work is different. And I was like, yeah, it's different. Didn't understand it until I came in and looked at the conversation. I went back and scaled up the conversation. I was like, stenographer, come up. Let me see the conversation. Oh, I see the points. Now I see these points. As you learning yourself, as you mastering yourself, you becoming the guide, you becoming your Titan self, you understand the reason that you're sitting here. You understand your purpose of doing certain things. For me as a psychoanalyst, it goes naturally with what I am. My human design is manifested generator. I've talked about this before. My human design is manifested generator. My head is wide the fuck open. It's all 60, it's 61s up here. That's all occult. That's all occult and the mystery of life and the occult and the sciences. That's what my head is open for. The undefined aspects in my human design chart are all of the lessons that I needed to learn to come into my healing purposes, what I am in this space at this point in time. That's what your undefined parts of your chart are. Everything that you ain't defined in your human design chart, those are the aptitudes of your purpose. You already have the foundation. That's why you came in as what you are. So everything that you're doing outside of this is your purpose. This is you coming from consciousness or you becoming aware of your shit to becoming enlightened. Enlightenment is simplifying everything. The most simple explanation to everything that you do. This is the aspect of you don't have to know anything. I never have to know anything. It's always a constant stream. That's what enlightenment is. When you come into that state of enlightenment, you've learned how to honor your thoughts. You've learned how to honor your thoughts. You've learned how to cultivate your energy. You know, you're now looking at, nigga, I know when that's a projection and I'm feeding a projection. I'm not feeding projections anymore. You know when you do certain things. Most of the motherfuckers I used to fuck with, for me to be around them now, they're fucking clients. I remember when I said that all out, I was like, they're clients. Why don't you deal with anybody? Nigga, I got a soul tribe. Them the motherfuckers that I talk to and deal with on a regular basis, whether I'm talking to them through the ethers or we all in sync with something, we all making different posts we all making posts that if you look at all of our posts seem to connect together somehow. And you like, nigga, I just looked at my whole timeline and everybody in that alignment that's in that mutual friend list, they all said the same shit and they all build on with each other and they had a conversation with each other in 3 damn months. That's your soul tribe. Your soul tribe, you ain't got to be around physically. The only time you feel like you need to be around shit physically is based on a projection aspect. There's still something that you need from that space that you need to experience. That's why you might feel that need to be around certain individuals. Because once you understand what the true hermit phase is, and you operate from your no self, you ain't gotta go nowhere. You literally can do it from your space. Unless you want to experience something, that's when you'll make that initial move into that space. Everything will do what it needs to do naturally. You ain't worried about shit. Once you understand this unification process of yourself, you ain't got to worry about everything else. Everything else going to come naturally. But you got to go through the unification process. You got to go through that dark night of the soul. You got to go through this work. If you're not going through this work, everything else ain't going to make no sense. You're going to get there. You're going to be confused. I've had a couple of conversations last year I had a bunch of conversations, and I was having a conversation with this one chick's friend, and she was like, she's used to being the alpha by default by dealing with beta ass niggas. I was like, oh, she's not going. That's why she bumps heads with me every time she tries to have a conversation. It makes sense. Most of you are motherfuckers. Most motherfuckers thought they were alphas and they were in this certain position with themselves by default because everybody around you was a fucking beta. Everybody around you was everybody around you was of a lower energy projection. So it was easy for you to maintain your status. It was easy for you to maintain it. While you down here in this space, if you notice, that's how most of this shit's been put together. Nobody owns anything except for each other's emotions. And when they do own something, it's based upon emotion. Without the emotional catalyst, can they do anything that they're doing? The same addiction complexes. Think about it like that. Like the same high or the same excitement that a crackhead gets, cokehead, crackhead, whatever, chasing a high, is the same high that a prostitute gets. The same neuro-linguistic patterns are activated in the mind. So if I take a crackhead and sit him here, and I take a prostitute or a porn star and sit her here, and I put in front of them, blindfold these motherfuckers, and tell them to talk about his experience with crack and her experience with gangbangs and trains, the same aspects in their brain are going to light up. Same aptitude, same spots in their minds are going to light up. So it's only the memory based on the emotional aspect that exists. Once you understand your emotions, the memories really don't fucking matter. You holding on to the memory because you ain't really you're not really, most people hold on to the memories because they don't understand the aspect of really experiencing the lesson, applying to the lesson. That's why you repress a memory, because you're not ready to experience the lesson. That's why whenever you look at every ancient text and they talk about snakes and skulls and scary shit on a door, and they show shit like this, if you're not ready to go through it, this shit looks scary and demonic. This shit looks satanic to you, evil to you, and all types of shit to your ass. So anybody that's still saying, when you really start thinking about it, you start breaking shit down, destroying the old paradigm, because the old paradigm must be destroyed. When you hear anybody talk about satanic and Luciferian and satanic and Luciferian and the Kabbalistic and all this shit, it's like, nigga, wait, time out. Luciferian, I'm Lucifer, so okay. That, whatever you about to say about that, really, you're saying that you start to understand that they're saying it through a projection or through an emotional construct. They're giving you the key that you need to get. But you looking at it based on, if you looking at it, just like Bobby Hemmings said it, you saying anything else, you looking at it through anything else based on a physical manifestation or trying to make some shit happen down here, you're going to be upset. So whenever I hear a motherfucker talk about satanic aspects, the last time that I read any satanic text, Every single text talks about taking ownership and taking ownership of yourself. Every text that I broke down and understand, it always says the aspects of you taking ownership of yourself, taking accountability and responsibility for your own life. You're a light. Everything, do what thou wilt, all that good shit. Every time I read any satanic Luciferian text, that's what that shit says. Same narrative. So anything outside of that, motherfuckers are using it, and that means there's an aspect, because that goes into the same aspect of, think about it like this. If you ever looked at sitcoms with like the white kids and they were cokeheads, their sons are cokeheads, their sons are on opioids and all this other shit, all they do is take their kid to rehab. That shit all out in the news. The first thing that they say is he was going through some things, his mom just died, or this just happened, and they take their kid to rehab. That's a lesson to learn. They take their kids through a rehabilitation process. They own the damn whether they own the rehab center or they gonna write it off on their taxes because their kids employed. The reason that they're able to do it is because their kids employed. Their kids employed under their company, under the trust. So of course, they're gonna go to rehab. Meanwhile, in our community, we got all this shit going on and we ain't dealing with it. Uncle Ronnie's still running around touching little girls. He been touching little girls ever since you was little. Ever since you was little, Uncle Ronnie been running around touching little girls. And now you just upgraded this nigga to sugar daddy status. He is sugar daddy now. You made it okay. You gave it an image to make it, you gave it a plausible image that made it okay. Oh, he just a sugar daddy. You okayed it. You okayed it. It's that means it's okay. Aunt Gladys has been running around touching little boys for motherfucking ever, and you just said, oh, she just a cougar. You made it okay. You agreed to it. You made it okay. You made a meme about it. You made it funny. You made that, you created an anchor point for it to be all right. I'm gonna laugh the shit off. But have you dealt with the internal aspects that it deals with your ass? Have you simplified it outside of bias? My 3 uncles off my mother's side, alcoholics out of this fucking world. Alcoholics out of this fucking world. After I understood that they went through a bunch of traumas, they've all passed it. They've all transitioned now. The way for me to open up that gate through a healing process of me understanding why I don't have to drink and all this other shit, going through these narratives of what they went through and understanding for myself. Now I understand why they were alcoholics. I have created a narrative of why they're alcoholics outside of bias. They were conduits of the libations that I poured. That's how I use their energy. So now every time someone talks about my uncles, I'm like, yeah, he did that, and this is the reason that he did it, and he went through his own thing. I can now simplify it because there's nothing to hide. There's no secrets. So when it comes to the secret society shit, that shit really don't fucking faze me. So someone says something about that shit, my energy doesn't go there anymore. I now transmute that energy to a high, in honoring that aspect, I can take it always to a higher position. Secret society don't bother me. Oh, the government's evil? All right, cool. The government's only evil to motherfuckers that don't have any ownership of anything. I own my company. I built my company through ownership. I got 3 grants pending. I already did the work for them grants to come through. I already got 3 grants pending. So I already understand what taxation is. They cannot tax cash flow. So when I make a post and I say donation and I say write donation under it, nigga, that's cash flow. They can't tax it. I understand their game. I understand the mechanisms of the game. So that's really not phasing me. So what's next? Man, they killing us off every fucking day. These niggas being released anyway. They serve the purpose. If I'm triggered by somebody getting knocked off early with their innocence or whatever it is, I can get stuck within that ritual and feed into that space. It's something that I ain't dealt with yet. Everything that's been happening, motherfuckers getting popped off, knocked off, all that shit. I'm like, all right, cool. It really doesn't faze me. It doesn't hit. I'm not like, oh my God. It doesn't faze me. It doesn't hit me. It doesn't do the same. It doesn't take me out. It is, I don't need a distraction anymore. Everything that I build, I understand that as I'm building, shit's going to be destroyed. So if shit's happening down here in natural momentum of destruction, it's happening, nigga, I'm the guy, I'm the titan of destruction. Of course that's supposed to happen down here. I'm not getting in the way of progress. Progress is the chaos. The more chaos that's being pursued, the more I know progress, the more I know that the progress is working. Because something needs to be destroyed anyway. That's the whole aspect. That's the whole aspect of alchemy. That's like if someone told you right now, you get $1 million, but if you press that red button, somebody dies. Could you press the button? Hell yeah, I can press the damn button. Because I'm gonna formulate my thoughts so it don't end up being somebody around me that's gonna be around me. When you think about the byproduct is your distraction. When you think about the byproduct is your anchor. That means you're going to do everything by that. You're going to do everything right by that byproduct. So if you have not understood that money is energy and you understanding your emotional currency and your emotional stamina and you swearing by money, money is the conduit that you're going to anchor and live by. That means you will always be anchored and always be implemented by money. That means when something is going to be challenging your money, you're going to say, nigga, I can't do that. That challenges my money. That's only because you have not learned that money is the money or the debt is only the liability, is only the byproduct. Your energy is no longer working for you. You working for it. If I air out some shit about bitches or chicks and their emotional wounds, the chicks go look. If I sit here and tell every nigga to go grab the book, The Way of the Superior Man by David Davida, and they go grab this book and they actually start studying that book, and chicks look at me like, oh my God. And I've told women in my lectures, and told women, everybody to go grab that fucking book. I remember one lecture when I did the sex lecture. When I did the sex lecture last year, when I did the sex 101 lecture, and I broke down the book, broke down the book, The Way of the Superior Man, I got a streamline of inbox messages talking about, oh my God, this book breaks down everything. We gonna lose our leverage. Because that book literally breaks down everything, and motherfuckers are gonna lose their leverage. That's what most motherfuckers are actually scared of when it comes into actually doing your healing work. You're afraid you're gonna lose the leverage that gave you the ability to use your identity the way that you use it. The way that you used to love, the way that you used to implement and honor through your aspects of love, the way that you used to get everything. All of that's going to naturally change because you're no longer looking at it based on an anchoring point. You're looking at it based on to your true self. There's nothing left to hide. The only thing that's been hidden is what you got hidden. The only thing that's ever been hidden is what you got hidden. That's the power to everything that's hidden. As above, so below, as within, as without. So wait. I ain't got no enemies in CA. You do. You got some shadows you ain't dealt with. You got some shit you ain't dealt with. Deal with that shit. I guarantee none of that other shit exists. You deal with those biases inside of yourself. None of the other shit exists. You start taking care of yourself. None of the other shit gonna work. They can't use it against you anymore. They only can use it. They only can use it because it's implemented already inside of you. That's the only way. That's the only way they can use the shit against you. Only way they can keep your ass shut the fuck down. Only way they will keep your ass shut the fuck down, oppressed, stressed out, is because there's something inside of your ass you ain't dealt with yet. The only reason that old buddy can keep you stressed the fuck out is because he represents an aptitude of something you have not given to yourself. The only reason Shorty can do what the fuck she do in thirst trap niggas is because there's something inside of the nigga that he has not understood with inside of himself and worked on inside of himself. He still needs that aspect outside of him as an anchoring point. That's the only way niggas still can do the shit that they do. That's the only reason motherfuckers still can use what they use, is because you ain't dealt with it yet. Because once I noticed, once I started dealing with a lot of shit, there were certain things that I didn't need anymore. It wasn't based on need or want. It was based on my desire for it changed. The way that I wanted it, the aptitude of what I needed changed. Once I understood my identity complexes and the crisis and the agents and the operation systems that I used to go through a certain point. Once I removed those from myself, whether it was from the wounded, but bandages or pacifying the wounded masculine, or bandaging and masking the wounded feminine aspects, I really understood what femininity was. And I embraced my femininity as much as I embraced my masculinity. So then when I started having conversations, I could tell when Shorty was stuck in her masculinity, her wounded masculine, or I could tell when somebody was stuck in their wounded feminine. I could see it different. I could see it. I only can see it when I'm outside of it. You can't see it when you're inside of that shit. So when you get stuck in this reverend of piety and you're saying, oh, nigga, broccoli's going to be the reason I'm out of this place. 1 second. We back. Once you understand the aptitudes of yourself beyond the emotional complexes, once you understand the emotional aspects, everything down here is based on an emotional complex. That's how it's sold. That's how it's given. That's how it's maintained. Everything's down here based on emotion. Once you understand that aspect of yourself, once you understand this within inside of yourself, then you can't be sold emotionally. You can't be sold. Shit can't be sold to you. Things cannot be sold to you emotionally. They can't use emotion to make you buy some shit. You got to understand that shit at the first point anyway, because that's how motherfuckers connect to you anyway. Motherfucker tell you a whole sob story and you like, oh my God, that's so sad. But meanwhile, you understanding that shit happened last year, the year before last, the month before last. Last year they did the same exact thing. Every fucking year they go through the same exact thing. And every single year, the same continuum is you're always there. Why? Because right after it happens, if you ever looked at your conversation, go back to your conversation log that you have with yourself. You spend more time talking about them than to them. Most of the shit that most motherfuckers do from an unhealed perspective that I've noticed that I used to do all the time, most of the time when I was having conversations with people and I was being critical, or I hid my criticism or my critiquing or my words that I would say to them, I hid them behind me counseling them. I hid that shit behind counseling them. Yo, I'm just trying to tell you some real shit so your ass actually do this real work. No, I wasn't. In reality, I was hiding aspects of myself. Okay, that's all I was really doing. I was hiding aspects of myself in the conversation. So it always sounded like I was sitting there having a conversation with them and I was like giving them some good fucking words. But in reality, I was talking through my wounds. You can't give nobody any advice when you're talking through your fucking wounds. Because the only thing they're going to connect to is the wound. Some people can learn in that way. Other people are not going to learn in that aspect. Because you're going to be looking, as long as you're using the wound as your conduit, as your base, you're always going to need a physical aspect or that anchor. You're always going to need a physical anchor to make the example of what you've done. Because once you internalize it, once you internalize your energy and you build from that space, it's a different function in that space. You can tell when something's been built based on emotion, and you can tell when something's built on a wound, that emotional wound, rejection, just by how it's said, just by how it's spoken. Once you start understanding this aspect, you start listening to people, you're like, they sound wounded. They sound hurt. They sound like this. Damn, is that me sounding like that? Or is that them sounding like that? Let me listen to this conversation again. Let me look at it from this position. Once you start understanding that, everything that hits you with a trigger is meant to trigger you. And when you go back and look at it and it don't trigger you no more, congratulations, you graduated. But you got to go through the process. Most people don't want to go through that process. Most people don't want to level themselves up because of what it involves to level yourself up truly. You want to go fix the past. Most people want to get stuck in fixing their past. Some people can get so stuck in fixing their past that they use their past. Your past and your future are both based on assumption. The now is the only thing direct. The past is based on indirect assumption. No, the past is based on direct assumptions, and then the future is based on indirect assumptions. This is how that shit works. Directly, because of my past, I can make an indirect assumption based on my future. So because my mother did not show me the love that I needed, that means indirectly in my future, I can assume that every one of my relationships are going to be based on my mother. Based on an aptitude of showing me something about my mother, showing me something that my mother did not do. I'm going to be looking for something that my mother did not do. Only in the now can I assess those wounds in order for me not to have assumptions or anxiousness or anxiety attacks about my future. Because I can now see how my future can be. I can now see the development of my future. I can answer the now what? I'm in my purpose. I'm in my lane. I can now see how my future is going to play out. I can accept how my future is going to play out. I can accept my role in how I create the continuum that's my future. Rather than me sitting in that space and be like, well, once I do this and once I do that and once I do that, my future be straight. Meanwhile, 4 months go by, 4 years go by, 10 months, how many months go by, and you still sitting in the same position and you still blaming everything outside of yourself. It was because of her. It was because of them. It was because of my job. It's always going to be because of something else. It's never going to be because of you. Once I understood that it was because of me controlling my dynamic, I really started putting in the work on my dynamic. But until I accepted that responsibility of my dynamic, I had a pious position based on reverent fundamentals of me being conscious. Now that I'm conscious, I was still stuck in a space with myself of the white man this and the white man that and the white man this. And they're the motherfuckers that stopped me from doing everything that I need to do. No, they weren't. They were instruments that I put there to stop me from doing what I needed to do. No white man stopped me from making a podcast. No white man stopped me from starting a clothing and merchandise imprint. No white man stopped me from creating creating the services for readings and consultations and doing therapy. No white man stopped me to do that shit. I can make them the excuse, but in reality, it's only on me. It's something that I did not do. Something that was not pertaining to my truth. I was walking in a certain space that was not true to that space. I stayed too long in a certain position. That's how it came out. I was doing it based on this, and it kept coming up, and I needed to deal with it. Because now that I've dealt with the last of now that I've dealt with the indirects, because the direct aspects is your traumas. The indirects are the results of your traumas. Now that I've already dealt with the direct aspects, the direct wound, now I can also now see, and you can see that all over DC Legends, that show DC Legends, that's on Netflix, when they're fixing all the time scars and shit and riding around the wave rider and shit. Now that I fixed all the direct scars, now I can see all of the indirect scarring. Everything that happened because of this event. And now that I'm facing the indirect aspects, now I can actually build some shit. I could build everything, but it would not be organic. It would be a GMO. It would be a program. And the only reason that a program would exist is because I would have to sit there every other day and acknowledge some shit in order for me to say, well, yeah, I did. No. That's not how it works. As long as I'm in servitude to something, I never can maximize my potential. As long as I'm in servitude to my emotions, I never can maximize my potential. As long as I'm in servitude to my emotional wounds, my scars, I will never maximize my potential. As long as I'm always serving something. So even when I let it go, I'm still in servitude to it. I just threw it over there somewhere. That's avoidance. Letting go, it naturally happens. Everything naturally happens once you start the process. Letting go naturally happens. Compartmentalization dissolves. Boundaries start to be created. The standard starts to be put into place. And all you're doing is writing in, filling in your blanks. Writing your new book. Until you do that, you're only going to be writing from the old book. You're just reading the old book. That's why I tell motherfuckers, do not get stuck in the damn book. Eventually, the book's going to be led to you anyway. 90% of the craziest thing about this book, as an example, this book right here, an example, Mind Control 101, by the time I read it, I already downloaded 93% of this damn book. Downloaded this book, 93% of it. It made me really understand what Bobby Hemmett would talk about when he talked about scholarship. Bobby Hemmett look at a book, give you a couple words out the fucking book, and that was it. He just told you to go get the book so you have the information. Just because you want to go deeper. Now I understood. Now I have an interpretation of what that fucking means. I don't really. The only time I'm gonna give you a book is as a anchoring point to understand, to give you some more depth into your works. That's the only time I'm gonna give you a book. Other than that, like, I really don't use books. Everything that I've gathered is based off the experience, the study, and everything that I've done up to this point. That's my basis. That's the base. That's the intellectual property. That's the foundation. Everything that I build on top of that, the catalyst is the download of the channel that I get to drop that information, to drop that trigger, to drop that bomb, to put that shit into place. And it fits. It does what it needs to do. That's what I'm here for. That's the purpose. As you heal, you change. That's the tax bracket. Everything naturally changes. The way that you used to do shit don't exist anymore. It's the same equivalent to you get a new car, you get a new crib, you get a new job. You don't go take that shit back to the hood. So when you looked at niggas that never went back to the hood after they got their shit, they technically did what they were supposed to do. They were going to do that anyway. That's naturally within you. So when you think about the separation complex, we all need to come together. If everybody has a fragmented psyche and traumas they have not dealt with, the only way that they can take in that information is through a fractured psyche. That's why niggas will never unify to an existence of moving some shit around. It won't happen. Because in order for that to happen, motherfuckers got to deal with their internal wounds first. In order for niggas to deal with their internal wounds, they got to admit that they need therapy, they need counseling, they need to get that help. They got to admit that point first. And if they have not worked with their inner child, your inner child actually bucks against it, just like an inner child don't. Just like when you were little and you didn't like broccoli or vegetables or certain food, that's the exact same way they treat information that's based on helping them or healing them. They don't know any better. They're in their cycle. I'm not in that cycle anymore. I'm not there anymore. I'm different now. I'm not the same person. I'm about building. I'm about growing. I'm about destroying some shit. I'm about a whole different aptitude of things. I'm not there no more. I don't feel bad for not being there anymore. I don't feel any type of way. I'm not feeling any emotional aptitude or feelings in any type of way. It is not based on avoidance. That's one of the major keys. Is like, you're not doing this based on avoiding some shit. That's what Brother Panic was always talking. Whenever Brother Panic was talking about, most motherfuckers come in and they get the information and they just replace one thing for another. I remember I've talked about that same shit before. Niggas replace this out, switch out Jesus for the fucking Orishas. But if you go to any Mexican, you go to any Hispanic grocery store and you go look at their section where they got candles at. If you go look at the candles, they got like the saints on them. Go look on the back of the candle. We got all of the Orishas on the back of the damn candle. You read any book on. Today is a book showing day. You read any book. Divination conjure style. Reading cards, throwing bones, and other forms of household fortune telling. Star Cassius, the author of the old conjure style, and I got that other book. Working Conjure, A Guide to Hoodoo and Folk Magic, Hell, the first, I'm actually on the page where it's at. You read any of these books and it gives you the aspects and it tells you the origins of the priest shit, the priesthoods and shit, and how they put the Orishas or the saints and they made them the Orishas. It just tells you how everything advanced based on the fundamental aspect, carrying on the fundamentals. Once you understand the fundamental, once you understand that everything is outside of you is a fundamental of yourself, then you actually can that's how you unlock the aspects of the magic. So if I sit here and I've said this before, if I sit here and if I hear when I hear niggas say fuck Jesus, and I'm at the point with myself where I'm like, nigga, I no longer say fuck Jesus, nigga. I'm at a point where I say I am I am Jesus. Nigga, fuck the devil. I'm Lucifer, I'm the devil, nigga. Now what? If I claim it, if I claim what the fuck it is, and I understand the aptitude of what it is, and I build the aptitude of what it is, it no longer has power to them. I've taken it back. Oh shit, nigga, wait, if we do that, then what? Now next is to build with the shit, nigga. Do what you need, do what the fuck you want to do with it. Get your ego under control. Submit, have your kill your ego, bring that bitch back to life. It now submits to you, and now it now works for you. That's all you doing. The whole process of me going through shadow work, me going through the conscious phase, going through shadow work, coming to this point is now to actually talk about the LLC mentality, the ownership mentality, the alchemist secret society, building retreats, doing shamanistic healing, doing the psychoanalytic therapy. Everything that I do is based on me once going through the fucking aspects of the shadow work. It's not going to be, you're not going to do anything else in the space that you at now. That's not what it's there for. I now realize why I had to go look at this. Like when I talked about the aspects of servers, I now understand why I had to go look at why I was stuck in restaurants for so long, and why the aptitude of me loving restaurants outside of the ego was to understand what it looked like for every server does the same exact thing. They blame the cooks or they blame whatever. You might have a server in there that doesn't blame anybody. They take their responsibility. But at a certain point in time, you learn an accountability and responsibility. That's what your job is. Because I can guarantee this motherfuckers, it's your job right now. Them motherfuckers they'll always say, I don't know why motherfuckers try to tell me some shit to do. I'm a grown-ass man. I'm a grown-ass fucking woman. But they act like a fucking kid at the fucking job. You there to learn a lesson. You always in the right position. You always in the right position. Where you at right now is where you need to be at. Until you learn the lesson, it's going to keep repeating itself. Where you at right now is where you need to be at. Until you learn the lesson, until you understand whether it's an experience or an observation, you ain't going to move away from it. It's just going to fill it back. It's just going to magic mirror itself and create another image. It's going to create another aspect for you to learn for yourself. It's time to learn. It's time to heal. It's time to advance. How you want to do it. What do you want to do? You don't keep blaming everybody else for your shit. You don't keep avoiding your purpose. You don't keep avoiding your responsibilities. That's all you do. That's what most motherfuckers are doing. You avoid your responsibilities, and it becomes a fun ass distraction. I can blame everything on the white man, but then what the fuck that mean for me? I can blame everything on my mother, but my mother's my daughter. My mother was my daughter and aunt from past lives. So that don't exist anymore. I blame everything on my pops. My pops was a member of the priesthood with me in past lives. My pops was a member of the priesthood with me. He was the main teacher of me. He was the main aspect when I was going through the systems of the mystery schools, my pops served as my mentor. He been doing the same shit ever since. He'll keep repeating that same cycle until he learn his shit. He can't learn it until I've learned mine. Next cycle he go through, he gonna have all the next cycle he come back through, he got all this shit he get to go look at. That's what you're doing it for. You're not doing things to be here forever. You're doing things to lay the lines for, so when you go to where you need to go at, when you leave and don't come back, you have information sitting down here. That shit breaks down into that aptitude of thought goes into your children. If you have kids, you're taking care of kids, you got kids around you, all of the aspects, everything you're doing is to lay the example for what's next. How are you going to do it? Are you going to be like your parents and your grandparents and your great-great-grandparents, building a life or building a space for some shit that don't even exist when it gets to that point? Or are you actually going to start moving forward in your shit? What are you going to do? Because if you're not doing it, here's the thing. If you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing to yourself, in your truth, standing on your square, doing what you're supposed to be doing, you're naturally saying fuck them kids. You're naturally saying fuck everything else anyway. You just ain't admitted it to yourself yet. Hell, some of the first things that I give a couple of my clients is, nigga, say it. I want you to say it out loud, nigga. Fuck them kids. I had a consultation Tuesday with a young lady, and I was like, say fuck your kids. I could never say that. Through her reading, I was like, you're basically doing that. And broke down aspects of her with her, broke down these aspects of the multiple boyfriends and the baby fathers and all this stuff. I was like, you're just living out your mother's life now. She was like, I know, but I didn't want to admit that. I said, that's the first part of this process. You got to admit the fucked up shit that you did. You did it. Whose life were you really living? You just lived out your mother's life for the aptitude of your life. Now that you've accepted it, now it's time we can do the work. You can't do the work until you accept the shit that you've done, the shit that you created, the spectrum of where you created it through. You can't go forward until you deal with those wounds. I don't care what you do. Everything else is going to be an illusionary aspect. You may have won something one time, that shit going to evaporate fast as fuck because you ain't got no basis for it to be built upon. That's what hope is. That's what the hope process is for most motherfuckers. You hoping to win a couple dollars. You hoping to get that job. You hoping to get that advance. You still hoping on that shit. You ain't built nothing for it to go into. It's going to go into the old compartments. That's why you got motherfuckers around you. It's another thought. I'm just going off channels right now. Whatever come through, come out. That's why most of the time when you see motherfuckers around you, comforts, and they buying TVs and they buying cars and they buying all this shit, and you looking at them like, yo, they doing this and they doing all this. That's the distraction. Because in reality, you'll say to yourself, in reality, you'll be like, how many TVs do they need if they buy a TV every single year? Man, you know what happened to my last TV? My baby mother broke it. Okay. So you bought another TV this year? Yeah. You know what happened to the TV last year? My girlfriend broke it. Nigga, do you notice that the feminine that comes into your life breaks up the shit that you try to hold on to? Man, I ain't never thought about it. Nah, man. Can they crazy? Like, no, nigga. They keep breaking your distraction. Niggas are coming into your life to break your distractions. They trying to break you away from your distractions. They coming through evil. But you saying they evil, they crazy, and all these old ass titles. That's why they doing it. They come through to break away your distractions and destroy your illusions. That's what they came in for. Bitches be crazy and shit. They came through to destroy some distractions. That nigga that came in your life and turned your world upside down, he came through He came through to destroy some distractions. That's why he was positioned there. That was their position. That's their job. That's their purpose. They coming to break you out of your pious complex. They coming out. You were prudish until you met that one nigga, and that nigga stuck his tongue in your ass, and then your ass went fucking crazy. That nigga unlocked some shit with inside your ass. You weren't ready for it yet. You hoped and hoped and hoped. Didn't have nothing to build with it yet. Shorty came through and did some shit and said some shit to you ain't never heard before, and that shit fucked up your damn head, and you've been fucked up. You've been outside and uncomfortable ever. You've been chasing that ever since. Why? Because you did not learn the lesson. You gotta learn them lessons. You trying to set your standards based on that. That ain't gonna work. But that was fun. This is our question and answer period. You have any questions? It ain't gotta be about the topic that we discussed, because we talked about a lot of shit. But if you have a question, throw it up in the comments. You got a question, throw it up in the comments. We can get that cracking, get that bill going on with that. But I'm gonna do a nice little collective reading. If you would like a reading, only on Friday nights I do the donation-based reading. The Cash App link is in the comments. The Cash App link is also right here in the corner. Right here. She be right there in the corner, playing out in the corner. The Cash App link. Scan it. You want to donate? You desire a reading? Go ahead, hit it with that. But I'm gonna do a collective reading real quick. But yeah, there's no more excuses for this shit. Period. Like, there's nothing like. I don't live in those excuses anymore. You shouldn't be living in the excuses either. And if you here right now, you've been rocking me from a good while, or you're coming into a space with yourself where you're noticing that I'm done with these excuses. I'm done giving myself excuses. I'm done putting myself in a position where I'm saying this, but I'm not really doing it. You're done with it. You got to come to that point. You got to come to that point. That's the only way. That's the true way into that to that void. You got to go into that void. You got to be like, man, fuck all this shit. Fuck it all. I don't need this shit no more. That way you can start defining yourself. As long as you got a need and a want, you got an anchor. That's how it works. As long as you got a need or a want down here for something, you're still trying to make something happen based on your fixing your past, or trying to make your past great again. You're always going to have an anchor. You will always fall into the distraction. You will always fall into the ritual. Ooh. 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 The 5 cards that I just pulled. I'm going to do them like this. First card that I pulled was that High Priestess energy. As I've talked about the High Priestess and the High Priestess, the difference between the High Priestess and the Empress. The High Priestess is external. The High Priestess is external aspect. Embracing the necessary changes that are happening in the external. When you look at the High Priestess, that's what the High Priestess represents. It represents formulating the internal changes and making that, and embracing the internal flow and allowing that to create the external space. You're in a space right now with yourself where things have been changing, things are evolving, you're in a new position, and it's time. It's now that time and that point and that focal factor to allow the things that are coming into your space, the things that are coming into that space, to further allow the invest of change. Those things are teaching you vulnerability. Those things are teaching you openness. Those things are teaching you how to be more responsible. Those things are going to be the catalyst to help you with your energy. All of these things coming into your space right now, they're there to teach you how to work with your energy. They're there to teach you how to maximize your energy, maximize your potential. The thing that a lot of people do when they're in that space, whenever that higher sense of themselves comes in, is what happens is a lot of the old things that we thought that we dealt with start to come to the surface. The residuals, the remnants of those aspects come to the surface. The last aspects come to the surface. Remember, the Empress works in the aspects of internalizing, understanding the internal aspects. The High Priestess is going to show you the aspects of the more external aspect of that's a representation of some shit that was based on the external aspect that you were avoiding. You're in a new position, which leads to the aspects of the Wheel of Fortune. That's why the Wheel of Fortune is played right behind that card. The Wheel of Fortune represents the aspects, in this case, of reading and understanding the elements inside of your space. How you're now creating your space based on the new elements. Everything that's in your space right now is a new element. You must define that element. Whether it's the water, which is the nurturing element, whether it's the fire, which is the purification of that new energy in this element, especially with this new Taurus energy, coming through that vibe with the Taurus energy. The Taurus represents standing firm and moving forward. 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 You'll be able to tell that you'll understand that you are teetering from moving forward with decisions that you made, because you're going to feel a sense of, whenever you go back into the space that is of your truth, you're going to feel this sense of overflow. Every time you go into that space, you're going to feel overflow. You're going to feel an overflow of saying everything. You're going to feel an overflow of speaking, an overflow of catching. It's going to feel like this sense of a much needed catch up. It's not going to feel like before in the aptitude, when you go into a space, it's going to feel like the tension to address things in that space. It's going to be a tension of addressing things. That's what's coming into that space. It's no longer going to be based on the thought per se. It's going to be based on the action. The Taurus represents the aspects of nurturing the action, bringing the material instinct, materializing things. Right now in your space, a lot of things are materializing and they're coming into the space. It's time for you to actually start working with that shit, using it. It's there for that reason. It's time for you to start being open to that space. It's time for you to start you've been vulnerable, you've been open, you've been speaking your truth. Now you're in the space. Now you're in the opportunity to do that. And that represents the aspects of that transition. The death. A lot of old things are about to die. The old standard that you have for yourself, the old way that you used to talk to yourself, the old conversations, the friendship, the old conversations that are represented in the old emotional conduits, that are represented in the physical manifestations, are coming to an end. You're feeling like you want to start ending a lot of shit. It's time to start ending a lot of shit. It's the end of that relationship. Let it happen. It's the end of that friendship. Let it happen. It's the end of that job. Let it happen. It's the end of a lot of things. Allow that shit to happen. It's supposed to. You feeling it? Let it happen. That's going to go into the aspects of you moving forward and ushering that new path. through the Knight of Swords. That new decision. That decision to move forward, the decision that you needed to make, it's time to make. It's time to stand firm by it. Those old aspects, the old aspects of yourself, of you trying to make your world be a certain way, it is not going to exist. Stop trying to do it. You keep coming to this point where the lesson is there, the elements of that lesson are there, and now you keep coming to that same dead stop point where you're trying to make shit happen and it never seems to happen. You're trying to live in the projection you're trying to live in that old ass projection of yourself. It's time to end all of that shit. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen the way that you want it to happen, or for why you want it. Why for it is happening is not going to happen. The energy that you're going to keep putting in, you're going to notice that it's going to, if you're still compartmentalizing your life, message from the spirit coming on that. If you're still compartmentalizing your life, it's time to stop that shit. If you're trying to keep things in their neat little compartments and you go over there, I'm going to deal with this, or I'm going to go deal with this when I need that, or if I'm feeling this way, that shit's over with. That's what that death card, that's what this death card is signifying. And yeah, that's what that death card is signifying. Craziest part is, this card was supposed to be the fourth card, but this card came out fourth when I put him into the stack. That shit transferred. You moving forward will involve everything else in your past to fall off. It's done. You're in a new position now. It's time for you to own your position. No more of this be what you were before you came here. That shit's done. There's no more of you being in the position that you were based on the old position of yourself was based on avoidance. It was based on avoidance. It was based on neglect. You were still holding on. You were still holding on to some shit. This last couple of months for you, months, weeks, days, however long it's been, this last little cycle for you has been you you shedding all that shit. All that shit's been shed. Don't try to go pick it back up because you're going to repeat the cycle. And then that leads into that Queen of Cups. You got a new chalice. You got a new focus. You got a new focal point. It's time for you to focus into and start watching your stuff nurture yourself. You see all of the tentacles around you. It's now time for you to stretch beyond, and it's time for you to actually start doing it. Everything that you want, need to this point, everything that you require to create that new space, it's already there. It's time for you to use it. It's time for you to use it. You've had it, it's there, it's time for you to reach out. Or are you gonna keep doing this? You want to do the same shit all over again? Like for me, for example, I don't want to repeat 2 years ago. I don't want to repeat last year. I learned those lessons. I maximized those lessons. I know that I have because of the position that I'm in now. I know where I'm at. I know what I'm supposed to be doing. I've embraced what I'm supposed to be doing. I embrace that motherfuckers are not going to like me. I embrace motherfuckers are going to feel some type of way. And I'm not going to maintain compartments to stay at war with myself. Stop being at war with yourself. Take this moment of time, go inside. It's time to go inside. Spirit's telling me to pull one more card. I'm going to pull an oracle card. It's going to pull all that together for us. I don't know why I did that. And the final card of the night. Whenever I'm giving love to the spirits through smoke, I always feel like Dave Chappelle character Dave Chappelle's character on fucking The Chappelle Show. It's Johnson. As I take a sip of this water that I'm pretty sure somebody spit it. You're ready but waiting. Everything that you are trying to achieve is in the ready but waiting phase. What are you waiting for? Nourishing energy. What are you waiting for? What are you waiting for? That advancement that you're trying to get into. What are you waiting for? That death that you keep jumping around. The end of a lot of things. What are you waiting for? Those elements that you're ready to wield. Once again, what are you waiting for? Embracing this energy of who you are now. Tapping into your feminine essence. What are you waiting for? Even when it comes to your work, and let's say you come and you're like, you know what? It's time for me to, I'm ready to start this process. The only thing that's going to stop you is you. That's the only thing that's going to stop you. You can make up all the excuses in the world and be like, you know what? If I do this though, then if I do this, man, then what does it mean? They're only an example of what you need to do. You can have somebody in your life right now that's made a jump or made a leap, and you're looking at them like, oh my God, they did some shit and they're no longer where they used to be at. And you can be sitting there like, oh my God, what, I need to do something for them. No, you don't. They're in their position for a reason. They're naturally going to fall into the place that they need to fall into. When are you going to fall into the place that you need to fall into? Because the only thing that naturally happens for a lot of times for us is whenever something happens that's emotional, the only thing that it brings up, the main thing that it usually brings up is that you've been wasting your time. You haven't been taking accountability. You haven't been taking responsibility. You haven't really been doing your work. That's usually what happens whenever you get anxious or anxiety or anything, is this letting you know that maybe I haven't been doing what I've been supposed to be doing. Maybe I've been avoiding some shit. Whenever energy shifts inside of whenever energy shifts inside of my space, I first assess to myself, like, what have I not been doing? I know I've been bullshitting, or I know I haven't been resting, or I know I've been putting things off for too long, or that's how I assess my space. That always keeps me in the flow. It's only when I go against that I notice when shit starts fucking up, I start questioning myself. I start doubting things. I start looking at things differently. I start looking for reason. I start looking for shit. I always noticed that was the same process every time that I felt anxious or attachment or doubt, or I felt it. I was dishonoring the thought by keeping it down in the lower aspects of myself. That's just over with. That's just over with. I'm done questioning myself and doubting myself. I'm in the position that I need to be in. And when it's time for me to move forward, everything is going to push me into the direction of where I need to go. I can't avoid it anymore. There's no more avoiding the shit that I need to do. There's no more avoiding it. I've taken responsibility of my dynamic. There's nothing stopping me. There's nothing, oh my God, I'm being stopped. No, there's nothing stopping me but me. There's nothing stopping me from advancing, exploring, growing, nothing but me. There's something that I need to work on. It's okay. I want you to be the fucking best. I want you to tap in and be the fucking best. I want you to be the fucking best. I desire you to be the best. I desire you to exceed all your limitations. I desire you to do that fucking work. When you're ready, that's what I'm here for. The first half of you being ready is you coming in, and you getting onto this. You ain't got to accept the invite. When I send out invites to choice players in the game, you ain't got to accept the invite. You ain't had to subscribe. There's a reason that you did it. There's a reason that you tune in. There's a reason that you here. Embrace your lesson. Embrace your greatness. Yeah. I want you to be the best. Services from consultations, readings, products, support. Whether you go cop a tapestry, cop something from the store, you coming for a service. Appreciate all that support. That's what we here for. I love you. We love us. Ashe.